Haman Nature, a journey in search of a peaceful and prosperous society with human nature as a guide. Led by your host, Adam Haman.
Hello and welcome to Haman Nature and to part 2 of our coverage of the 2024 Libertarian National Convention in DC. With me as always is my trusty Libertarian sidekick, Tyrone. How are you?
I am doing well, Adam. So we left off part 1. We kind of gave a review, a recap of the convention through the first few days. Kind of jumped around a little bit there, but you were there. So you're able to provide a personal perspective. Last time we were speaking, we talked about RFK Jr. speaking. We talked about the debate that Vivek Ramaswamy had with Clint Russell, moderated by Dave Smith. We talked about some of the happenings and the things that kind of went wrong with the convention. All that said and done, it's hard to not to call it the big event, right? But the big event of a convention should be the nomination of your candidates for office. But let's be honest, that wasn't the big event of this convention. So why don't you? Everybody knows that Donald Trump, former president, number 45. Came to speak at the Libertarian National Convention, and this caused a lot of turmoil. So in a couple episodes ago, we talked about this. We kind of went through the pros and cons of, should they, shouldn't they have invited Trump to speak. Why don't you just recap your feelings real quick about that before we dive into what actually happened?
Oh, sure. I was for it all the way. The purpose of this political party, from my perspective, is to make more popular the libertarian political philosophy so that there will be more people who want freedom and liberty. And then the vehicle by which that gets disseminated into the legal system could be any party. I don't really care. But our purpose is to persuade. And the first task of persuasion is to get people's attention. One of the biggest problems of our party is no one knows who the hell we are. They don't know we have one. If people have ever heard of us, we're dismissed as a joke because our presidential candidate got naked on stage during debate, or he's some goofball with a beard and a boot on his head. So attracting attention and making the most of it, I think, is critically important. And the point of having Vivek Ramaswamy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Donald Trump come speak at our convention is to get the national attention, which we did. And prior to it happening, I was concerned that we would waste the opportunity. And we can get into whether we did or we didn't, but it worked perfectly to get a whole bunch of national media looking at our convention and talking about us and who we are. And I think that was all to the good.
That brings up an interesting point. It's one that certainly has my own personal perspective has evolved over time. And I think maybe this is a little bit of where the divide in the Libertarian Party comes from. And I'm not going to call anybody blue pill or red pill. I think most people that call themselves libertarians are genuine on some of the core principles. And if you take this world's smallest political quiz, I bet everybody scores pretty close to the same there. I think that the real divide is, man, I don't want to use any derogatory terms here, but I'll call them the naive libertarians. And I say this as being one formerly. When you're young, you're grown up and you're full of piss and vinegar and you think you're going to change the world. I think you join a political movement, any political movement, but for those libertarian leaning, you join the Libertarian Party thinking, hey, we're actually going to win elections. We're going to change the way government works. and you go in there with this sort of moralistic, fight or die mentality, and like we can do this, and that's great. But I think, as I've gotten older, I've come around more to the side and influenced a lot by what Stephan Kinsella would say. And it was a hard pill for me to swallow, to realize that, oh shoot, we're not going to win any elections, and we're not going to we're not going to change the world through electing libertarians to political office. And it's really more about just using the platform, the every 4 years that the elections come around, to get the message out. So it's more of an educational focus, so that, as Stephan Kinsella would say, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think I'm paraphrasing him correctly, that when society collapses, which he sees there's no way it doesn't, that we've put enough information out there, somehow it's stored somewhere in books or online, if online still exists, but somewhere the knowledge is there to rebuild society in a libertarian fashion. And that's sort of the best hope we can do. So to that end, we want to spread the message to as many people as possible, so that whoever survives the coming doom, we have a chance to rebuild a libertarian society. Now, maybe that's being extreme, but do you think that's kind of maybe where this division is coming from, where people really think they can win elections? We'll call them maybe the optimistic libertarians, and you can call me a cynic libertarian if you want, where I say, nope, there's no hope, we're never going to win anything, it's all doomed, but let's just do what we can to get the message out there to as many people as we can, as Ron Paul would call the remnants, and we'll rebuild when the time comes. Am I seeing this wrong? Do you see that as a dividing line at all, or am I just way off base?
Well, it must be at least a dividing line. You've moved all the way from, hey, if I just got involved politically, in 5 months, Dave Smith will be president, to,
Right.
no, this is just a time capsule we're going to make for when the asteroid comes and destroys the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at, to be honest.
No, I think there are other purposes of the party and the message and what we do. Again, having people seek our vote allows us to rub off on them in exchange of ideas, which we think we're going to win because we're right. Also, I think you should get a libertarian on your ballot everywhere, or at least have the threat of putting one on your ballot in every race in the country, every race in every district in every state, because quite often we're the third largest political party, and quite often we're the margin of victory or defeat. And when people find themselves spending tens of millions of dollars on a political campaign and losing, and being perceived to have lost by the difference that is made up by a libertarian candidate who paid $100 for a filing fee, I mean, that gives you a lever by which you can say, well, look, maybe you should run better candidates, and maybe we wouldn't get in your way. I mean, that's a conversation that they're having in Colorado right now, where the chair there, Hannah Goodman, is literally making Republicans sign a liberty pledge if they don't want to just get votes, quote unquote, stolen from them by the libertarian candidate. Run better candidates, guys. And that offers on to the Democrats too. If you run a Tulsi Gabbard rather than a Elizabeth Warren or whatever, maybe you'll see a little less interference in your election. And I don't think there's anything wrong with pushing on that lever. Don't do anything unethical, and don't violate our bylaws, of course. But one of the ways that we can be influential is to influence the behavior of these other parties, and we can do that intellectually, and we can do that electorally. It's not just that we're just sitting around writing notes to put into a spaceship to send off on Voyager.
Voyager,
Star Trek 1.
Still,
so anyway,
probably one of the best Star Treks of all time. I mean, Wrath of Khan's the best. Everybody knows that. But man, I really loved the twist of Voyager at the end.
I did.
When I was a kid, I was like, what? I was really young when that came out, but I saw it in the theater, and man, it blew my mind. Anyway, I was a big Star Trek nerd anyway to begin with.
Plus, I'm prepubescent and I see a hot bald chick. That's weird. How weird. That could be a thing. Oh my God.
Oh man, were they giving us some propaganda back then?
Maybe
40 years later, whatever.
So anyway, the orange one.
Yeah, the orange one, the orange one. Well, okay. Somebody named Donald J. Trump showed up to the Libertarian Party. God dang.
So
Well,
as we closed the last episode,
yeah.
I think I was saying that Dave Smith got to speak, and Michael Rechtenwald too, and maybe one other. I can't remember, before the orange one. And Dave was admonishing us to boo when appropriate, but not act like absolute lunatics. Well, we kind of acted like absolute lunatics.
To that end, Adam, let's watch a little video from Reason magazine. This is just there's a longer video of this. You can check out online, but this just gives sort of a little bit of the flavor of what it was like. Hit play.
Let's take a look.
Donald Trump appeared before a raucous crowd of Libertarian Party delegates and his own supporters at the Libertarian National Convention in Washington, D.C. Starchild, a longtime Libertarian activist, was taken to the ground by security after he held up an anti-Trump banner. Trump drew his loudest boos after offering himself as the Libertarian Party nominee.
The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. That's nice. Only if you want to win. Only if you want to win. Maybe you don't want to win.
All right, so
only if you want to win. It's funny. You could tell the parts because he was reading off a teleprompter for a lot of that.
Yep.
But you could clearly see the Trumpy parts that were all him and right there.
If you just want to keep getting a 3%.
I mean, maybe you don't want to win. I don't know. But
oh my God, he crushed it. I swear to God. I hope he wins again just because he's so much fun to watch. I mean, the entertainment that is Donald Trump, it's hilarious. It's just like the greatest comedy show ever. But anyway,
I find him amusing as well.
So obviously that shows this was a bit more chaotic and full of mayhem than say what a lot of people have criticized as sort of not being a respectable room. You know, you can have your feelings about that one way or the other. What are your thoughts? Was the crowd right in sort of all of that sort of nonsense, or I won't call it nonsense, but a lot of this booing, turning their backs on him, holding up those signs, MAGA equals socialist. I mean, I'm going to have some comments about whether the Libertarian Party is serious about being a political party or not.
Well, before you do, it is silly to say things like the Libertarian Party is when you're really describing the behavior of individuals, because we're not an amorphous blob. But I will tell you that I was disappointed with the way a lot of people acted. And it's not because it's disrespectful and rude. I think it's counterproductive. I think we can get more from a man by displaying, yourself as a serious person or a serious group. And I don't think we did that. That said, most of the actual boos he deserved. He said some truly insane things. Not the least of which he read from a teleprompter about 90% of the time, but I can't believe anybody wrote down, "You should make me your nominee."
No, that seemed off the cuff.
That's insane. That's like
you
that
can
was
tell
off the cuff.
His voice inflection is different when
It's also an uncharacteristic misstep. I mean, it's smart for him to go to speak before a crowd and get on television and speak to, however many libertarian or libertarian-leaning people there are across the country, and pitch yourself that maybe you'd rather vote for me than Biden or whoever the LP nominates. That's a sensible thing. But to say something so dumb as, you should put me on your party ticket, that's an uncharacteristic misstep. But a handful of things really stuck out to me. One is that whoever wrote that speech for him, I assume, has been fired. It was weird. The speechwriter had Trump saying things that Trump doesn't know the meaning of. Like, he discussed Marxism in one or two places. I think Trump knows what that is. He used the phrase, because it appeals to right-leaning libertarians, the forgotten man, addressing the the person who pays for all the socialist plans. I think that first started getting used under FDR. I don't think Trump's ever heard that before. I even heard a reference to the American system, which is a throwback to Alexander Hamilton and Henry Clay and Abraham Lincoln, the system of national public works and financing, debt-based financing, to get the rich unified with the political and, make sure that all that crony stuff starts happening. It was weird. He doesn't know what those things mean. But the weirdest thing of all was he spent like a third of the speech, maybe more, just literally quoting an article written by some guy named DeRoy Murdoch.
That was
famous libertarian, according to Trump, DeRoy Murdoch.
I've never heard of
everywhere
him
in the room. I'm turning and looking at who? Like I've kind of heard that name before, but who? What's the name he's saying?
Yeah,
he's
that
fumbling
was
his
odd.
words. So I look him up, and he's just this conservative National Review writer. He's not a libertarian.
That makes sense.
So that also, he made some important concessions. Some were negotiated ahead of time, and some weren't. But the one Angela said, it's kind of why we want you to come. It would be great if you said that you were going to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence. And he did. That's what all the free Ross signs were that you saw in the video.
Right.
And he did at the end of his speech. He said he'd do that. And he also said that, he's pandering to libertarians and we're sensible. We got some good ideas. He says we'll put some libertarians in my administration, which doesn't mean anything, of course, because he just told us 50 different times that he thinks this DeRoy Murdoch guy is a libertarian. Yeah. So
right.
If you think it's going to get Scott Horton to be,
no,
appointing the people to be Secretary of Defense, it's not like that.
No, there's no way that happens.
No, of course.
I do think he would do the Ross Ulbricht thing because what does he care?
Fingers crossed. The problem with Trump is he's very agreeable with whoever's in front of him in the room.
The last person in the room, yeah.
Yeah. So somebody else is going to come and say how horrible it would be to blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, because drugs are bad.
No, it wouldn't be that. It would be the Treasury Department. They didn't give a damn that Ross Ulbricht started a site on the dark web where you can sell drugs. Lots of people sell drugs. They don't get 2 life sentences. You know what it was about?
Well, sure. I know. Okay, so you're making a good point for the real reason he was put in jail, but the political reason, what he would say on the campaign trail, or what would be advertised against him would be, Trump pardons drug dealer or whatever, right? That would be the attack because the conservative base is, anti-drugs, right? So conservative base doesn't give a
but I'm not sure if
about
the MAGA
Bitcoin and
I'm not sure if the MAGA
crypto.
base gives a damn. I'm not sure if MAGA cares at all
about legalizing drugs.
Yeah, that's your granddaddy's conservative that cares about that. I know a lot of conservatives that used to be all about hating drugs. That was 10 years ago, and now they do them.
All right. I have a couple of relatives who are pretty MAGA people. You know what? I'm going to ask them that question because I'd be curious, and they're very sort of also evangelical Christians too. So I would be curious to know what their answer is on that. And on that, I think the question I'm going to ask them is, okay, do you even know who Ross Ulbricht is? Let's assume they do. But what do you think his crime was? I guarantee they're going to say it's because he was dealing drugs on the internet. They had nothing. They don't even know any of the cryptocurrency crap.
If they've barely heard of him, they will think it was because he was dealing drugs. If they've heard of him a little more, they'll think it was because he tried to hire a hitman to kill a couple people. Because although he was never charged with any ridiculous crime such as that, because it's a total fabrication, that's what the media ran with in the run-up to his trial. But what he was really given 2 double life sentences back to back with no possibility of parole for was for screwing with the government's money. I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast, but I've been coming to Vegas for a long time, and in the late 80s, early 90s, you could take a chip from one casino, leave, go to Denny's, pay for your breakfast with that chip, receive fiat dollars and change. The Denny's will just go to some other casino and trade it in for money if they want. And this has been going on. You have this little circulatory system where casino checks are circulating like money. Well, the Treasury Department rolled the tanks when they heard about that was going on.
Is that right?
Yes, it is.
This is super interesting. I have not heard
Because what happens if a community starts realizing, oh, this is all just made up. We don't really need
Right.
your stuff. And that's why they were so pissed off at Ross Ulbricht. And it didn't help that he was a libertarian, a Rothbardian, who it's his side business for running the Silk Road was just posting all these articles about how we don't need the state. It's a bunch of crap. It's a corrupt gang. It's a bunch of criminals. They're using force. It's unjust. That's why he got 2 back-to-back sentences, and that's why the Libertarian Party cares.
Of course.
So yeah, your MAGA, friends, they don't know any of that, but they also got their heads stuck in the sand. And again, one of the great things about inviting Donald Trump to our convention is to get that story out. That's why we had 1,000 Free Ross signs out, so people maybe Google who the hell this guy is.
Yeah, all I'm saying is the reason why I'm thinking, let's say he does get reelected. I don't see how that's going to happen, but let's just say he does. I can see at the last minute, he's like, hey, I made this promise to free. And then somebody whispers in his ear, dude, you can't do that because it's going to look bad because everybody thinks he's just a drug dealer and you're going to be look like you're pardoning a drug dealer. And that's all Trump's going to hear. That's all the messaging would be on TV. No one's going to get into the weeds and the details about it because it's all about optics and politics. It's not about the truth, right?
Well, when people give me that objection, that's why I got to remind them, we're not playing 3-year-old checkers here. We're actually playing chess. It would be great to get Ross freed.
Of course.
But if that doesn't happen, we still gain tremendously by getting the exposure and the promise and millions of people looking into what this whole issue is. Yeah. That's an enormous win.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I know. I completely agree. I hope it happens. But the bigger question I have, let's keep it more focused on the impact Trump has either on the Libertarian Party or vice versa now. So now we've had this thing where we got the former president to show up. I shouldn't say we. I'm using the royal we. I had nothing to do with it. I'm not a member of the party. So. The Libertarians got a former president to show up, which is huge. It's obviously garners a lot of national attention, and it legitimizes you as a serious contender.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, we just see the clip that we just played, where it looks like pandemonium. To be honest, if that's what you're seeing on a 30-second CNN news clip, people being arrested and wrestled to the ground, boos and chants and signs saying MAGA equals socialist. I'm not sure another presidential candidate ever comes to another libertarian convention again. I think it's ruined. Like what are your thoughts about that?
Well, you have to remember that the Vivek and RFK Jr. events went really well.
Right.
And I also doubt that any other presidential candidate is going to come speak to us, at least not one who had already won the White House, was a sitting president for a while. And it's partially because of why we behaved, but I also never thought one would do it in the first place. I mean, Trump is a unique person who would be willing to take that chance and have the chutzpah to think that that he's going to make it work out for him.
It was probably a once in a lifetime thing anyway, right?
Yeah, I would rather our people handle it differently. But the coverage you see on TV, I mean, that was a Reason clip, I believe.
That was Reason, but
all
Reason
the other
like media
Reason like
headline,
any other media organization doesn't give a damn about telling you what happened. What they want to tell you about is the most sensational thing that happened. That's why that unfortunate individual who always seems to manage to get the photos of what the Libertarian Party was displayed for the majority of that little recap. It's because it's a point of you'll either love it or you'll hate it. That's why you show something like that. So yeah, I wish we'd behave better.
Let me ask you a different question. I think it goes back to this dividing line between the that's in the Libertarian Party right now. So I think most people are not like me who grew up as a libertarian. So I didn't grow up right. I didn't grow up a Republican. I didn't grow up a Democrat. I grew up a libertarian. So for me, there was never this moment where I changed sides or I came to a change in my philosophy. So a lot of people, grew up a Democrat or on the left, and then they learn some things and are like, I don't really like everything the left stands for, and I've discovered some libertarianism. But to me, they carry over with them a lot of their left ideas and morality to that. Same thing from the right. People from the right, Republicans, they get disenfranchised from Republicans or whatever and find the Libertarian Party that way. But they bring their sort of right-leaning cultural morality, whatever ideas with them. So it seems to me like people that come from the left to the Libertarians, people that come from the right to the Libertarians, are never what I would call a pure Libertarian. They always seem to have some baggage left over. What I used to think back in the 90s was that, yeah, we can attract from both sides. I don't know what happened, and I really do want to learn more about this and research this more. But it seems to me the left just went super, like they got taken over by the progressives, and that they are so hardcore leftists, Marxists, whatever you want to call them. I'm not sure there's any more appeal to the left that can be made from the libertarian viewpoint perspective. I think at one point, like I said, in the 90s, we could attract people from the left and say, you know what, look, we're the most socially liberal party there is. We were the first to run a female vice presidential candidate on our ticket. We've always been for gay marriage, those types of things. Back then, it was all libertarians were pro-choice. So, the saying was, we're pro-choice on everything, right? It would be the bumper sticker or whatever. So we could pull a lot of people from the left, and we could pull a lot of people from the right. That, lower taxes, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff, fiscal responsibility. Whatever's happened in the last 30 years, I think the left is no longer. There's no conduit. There's no way to appeal to people on the left to bring them to the Libertarians. I think the only people left that are any chance are from the quote unquote right. And I hate using those terms, but look at Ron Paul, Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, Justin Amash. Guess what? They were all Republicans. So the only place left in the two major sides where there's any chance of drawing any sort of libertarian or liberty-loving people, to me, seems to purely come from the right. And what just happened at the Libertarian Convention was you just told the right to go F off. We hate your guy, we hate you, we don't want you to be a part of us. So to me, that's what just happened.
Your last part is correct. That was a big blunder. But the rest of what you say isn't true, simply because depending on what's going on in the country, one side or the other always looks unreachable. I mean, in the wake of 9/11, was anybody on the right reachable for the libertarian anti-war argument? No, of course not. We should always just preach the true message and try to frame it in a way that the person you're talking to is going to find appealing. But no, I would never say that anybody is unreachable. You just have to learn to speak their language and make them think, by honestly believing it, that that you care about the things they care about, because libertarians do. So I don't like what the room writ large did to Trump, and I don't like the way it was perceived, and I do think recruiting is going to be a problem. But we'll talk about who the libertarian ticket is next episode. But if you are not thrilled with every tit and with every little bit of the Republican Party, and you were hoping that the Libertarian Party would be a home for you, you got to use what just happened as a recruiting a tool. So if you want this thing to be better, well, then join your party and don't just sit on the couch and complain. Get in there, make this party what you want it to be, get involved, and then maybe you'll have some impact in what actually happens. And remember, the presidential race, assuming we don't all get blown to smithereens or captured and ruled over by aliens, this thing's going to be over in November. And then we still have a Libertarian Party doing important things on the ground in all 50 states. And so, no, I don't think there's any reason for despair or just assuming that the left is unreachable, because the principled left doesn't like the left either. I mean, Elon Musk is more of a libertarian now than he was 30 years ago, and he hasn't changed. Look at Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, the guys you like, that sometimes host for him. These people are still reachable because they aren't insane. The woke lunatics that get all the attention, yeah, sure, they're unreachable, but they always were. So I don't think there's any reason for despair. You double down on your principles because it matters, and you learn how to communicate effectively to the man or woman in front of you. And I don't want to hear any of this pussy shit. We ain't quitting. Tyrone, porcupine hobo, we ain't quitting.
Okay, so it was an interesting room. You said you were kind of positioned in the back, so you weren't like in the fray of it, getting punches yourself. From the coverage you've seen on the news, where everybody is just focusing with the same headline across every media that says Trump booed at Libertarian convention, right? That's the headline. Nobody says that people cheered him when he said things like Ross Ulbricht or other moments. While you were there in the moment of it, what was your immediate emotional reaction? Were you like, oh no, this is all going sideways?
No,
like, were you really worried, or were you like, this is awesome?
I thought it was fine. And even though I was in the back, so I didn't see the worst of it, I had a dozen, close friends that I brought with me from Nevada, and I talked to them about, and they were right in the middle of, the worst of it. And yeah, I just think it was not as great, as it could have been, but it wasn't bad at all. And he got cheers from us. He got huge boos from us. Some of the worst aspects, shouting things. I guess I didn't hear most of that. Some people were shouting ugly things. I don't know how much Trump could hear. Plus, he lives in that lovely little bubble. Did you hear what he said on Truth Social that evening or maybe the next day?
No, I don't think so.
This guy. So he blundered. I think it was a blunder, and said, you should just put me as your nominee, on your ticket. And then on Truth Social the next day, he says, spoke to the Libertarians at their convention. It was great. In fact, they offered to put me as their nominee on their ticket, but due to the rules of the Republican Party, I had to turn him down.
That dude, seriously. Wow. Talk about just seeing what you want to see, right? So because during the nominating part of the convention, someone did say, I nominate Donald Trump, right?
Sure.
And then, Angela McArdle
it wasn't officially nominated.
The paperwork, it was not appropriately filed or whatever, unlike what RFK Jr. did. Right. But all Donald Trump heard was somebody wanted me to be their candidate. It was
so amazing about him.
Dude.
What's so amazing about him? I mean, he comes across as a doofus when you hear a story like that, or delusional.
Oh my God, he is such a buffoon.
But that's not actually what it is. He's got this track record of just willing nonsense into reality.
Oh yeah, he's great. You've
heard about positive thinking and affirmations and all this stuff. Well, all that is focusing your mind and your will to a task and saying you're committed to it. Well, he commits himself to stuff, and obviously it looks like goofiness when you cross the line, but it just shows a person who's determined and believes in the power of positive thinking. I can't fault him for that.
Well, it was
hilarious. It was hilarious.
God, he's so funny. My God, he's so fun to watch. Get your 3% or whatever that was.
He's got us there.
God, it was so hilarious.
He's got us there, and we're not.
Yeah, you're right.
We're not going to get 1% this time.
No,
not our fault.
Oh my God, it was hilarious. Oh God, I love the Trump show, man. It's like,
so. Have you had enough of the Trump? Should we move on, or do you have anything more you want to know about what his impact was?
I kind of want to know. So while you're in the moment, you were what would you say? You were just excited. You were just in the zone with it.
And remember, at the tail end, like what he led with his speech was stupid, but around the 2/3 mark, he started actually. It was probably just platitudes, but he was actually saying libertarian sounding things. And then we got him to Say he'd put one of a Libertarian in his cabinet. He doesn't know what that means, but then he said he'd free Russ, and that was just amazing. All the signs apparently did their work or whatever.
He's probably thinking like, in his cabinet.
Oh, Angela McArdle's head.
Oh God! All right. Well, so that day ended. The speech is over. What, around 5 o'clock at night or in the evening? And then,
No,
was
it
there any
started.
other business that day, or was it just sort of done? And you
It
guys
started late. That was probably the whole thing ended because, again, after Trump left the stage, 3 of our presidential candidates took the stage for an impromptu Q&A moderated session to try and respond to what things Trump said, and
Okay.
so it was all over by 11:30 or 12, as late as that.
Oh, went that late?
Yeah,
Okay.
he didn't start speaking until after 8:30, 8:45,
Okay.
something like that.
So there was no more party business done for that day. It was
Nope.
just some speeches afterwards.
Yep.
And we can probably talk about the Michael Reagan.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think he should have changed the name of his campaign from "Wreck the Regime" to "Wreck My Campaign."
Before we quit, we were talking about how much the Libertarian Party needed a spotlight shown on it, and
Right.
why this was such a big thing. And
Yeah.
Trump, after having a speech written for him, and after prepping for coming to speak to us, thinks this D. Roy Murdoch guy we're going to recognize him as just a true blue libertarian.
Right.
Just goes to show the populace doesn't know the first. Let me give you a little story.
Okay.
My lovely wife, her mother grew up, didn't grow up, but has lived most of her life in New York, in Manhattan. And so she's a card-carrying leftist Democrat because it's literally the law. And Jennifer is a libertarian. So they butt heads. And at one point they're having an argument and it's getting tense. And my wife says, I know what your political philosophy is. I hear it all the time. You don't even know what mine is. And the mother says, "Oh dear, yes I do. You're a libertarian, just like Donald Rumsfeld." And she was serious. Why did she think that?
Yeah, why?
Because somewhere on the CNN or the CNBC, MSNBC, there was a clip of Rumsfeld, and I looked it up. He did say this. He said, "I am a libertarian on certain things," in between blowing the little brown people to bits or whatever he was doing. So it just goes to show that amongst the populace at large, we have a lot of work to do because the word just doesn't carry any meaning.
Yeah.
So get attention, get exposure, invite big orange goofballs who used to be the president and who may once again be the president, and get the attention that they bring. That's word to the wise.
All right. Well, that concludes our part 2 coverage of the Libertarian National Convention. Now, we're going to do another episode following this where we're going to review what actually happened with the Libertarian candidates, who they nominated, and go over some of the reactions that has happened across different media and some of the party politics that are going on, and maybe we'll make a couple of predictions of what we think is gonna happen with the future of the Libertarian Party in November, going forward, things like that. So, folks, join us next time for a continuing recap of the Libertarian National Convention.
But you can't just catch us anywhere. You should go to hamannature.substack.com because this one's just for special paid subscribers, at least for a little while, because we're going to dish the dirt. And you can't get dirt for free. So that's hamannature.substack.com, and we will continue this conversation then. Thanks for watching.